Hi, welcome to Conversion Conversations. This is Cameron, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about combiners, specifically combiners in the Transformers TCG. So everyone knows combiners are probably the most famous gimmick in the Transformers toy line and media, aside from the actual gimmick of transforming. They've been around since G1. We got a big revival around 2014-2015 with Combiner Wars, where we got new combiner toys. We got a Combiner cartoon from Machinima, a web series. We got Combiners back in comic books in a dedicated storyline by IDW. They came to us in Earth Wars. And then, of course, last year in the second wave of the Transformers TCG, we got Combiners in the card game via the Rise of the Combiners, a dedicated wave that gave us a bunch of Combiners. When it came out, it was very well received. When it came out, we kind of had Combiners of varying, strengths. Kind of at the bottom tier were Volcanicus and Devastator. Predaking and Menasor are both a lot of fun to play. Superion and Optimus Maximus, I'd say, had the best competitive scene. Superion definitely made a very, very strong showing competitively. Optimus Maximus, the Combiner, not so much, but the Sentinels team made a strong showing. And so these 6 Combiners are specifically picked out because they shared one trait in common, which is the Combiner Enigma. Each team has a green pip action card that you need to play when all your characters are in bot mode, either on the battlefield or in the KO area, and then you can actually combine them, move the total damage they've taken over to the combined form and use that. The Enigmas, so they wouldn't be dead cards in your deck after you combine, they do have secondary effects. And again, like I said, the Sentinels didn't necessarily use their Enigma as much, but what I'll say about these traditional, what we think of as the Scramble City style combiners, where it's 5 to 6 team members, they had a big weakness. And that is that even when the combiners came out in the wave they were in, these Enigmas are action cards that you need to draw or flip and put in your hand and play. And that meant that combining left you pretty vulnerable. There were, when combiners came out, there was already Photon Bomb, which are 2 damage to each character early in the game on a 5-wide team. That's 10 damage onto the Combiner. Both Espionage and one of the Combiner members, Mirage from the Sentinels, they both let you look at your opponent's hand and scrap an action. Espionage, you just call out the color green when you know your opponent's about to combine, and you can get an Enigma out of their hand. So unless they draw or flip another one, or have another one in their hand, you eliminate their ability to combine. Mirage does the same thing. You get to look and scrap an action. And then as the subsequent waves came out, it got even harder to do the combination thing with your combiner. Major Shockwave came out in wave 3, and he's just flipping constantly to strip you of your hand size. If you don't have cards in your hand, then you're not able to trade cards for your green pip to pick up the Enigma. If you have the Enigma in your hand, unless you're about to use it that turn, Shockwave's with, a showing off or a UFO or something, Shockwave's going to get that out of your hand. And then in wave 4, it kind of put, in my opinion, the nail in the coffin on combiners from a competitive aspect. I think they're still fun to play. I still love playing around with Menasor, but now they have to struggle with counter Espionage, which, this card just destroys them, right? Espionage, you get to scrap 1 battle card of the color that you call out. Counter Espionage, you call out the Enigma. You say, okay, I know you're playing aerial bots, therefore I call out the aerial bot Enigma, and you don't just get rid of 1 copy of it, you get rid of every copy of it that they happen to have in their hand. In addition, there's Decepticon Quake now, so in addition to Photon Bomb, Quake's out there pinging your wide team constantly. There is Tripwire, which lets you tap down your Combiner members, especially the 5-star members. Sentinels and Dinobot Combiner, not so much, but the traditional 5-wide teams that are 5 stars each. This just, again, ruins their day by preventing them from getting their attacks before they combine. Chrome Dome's another way to discard actions. You get to look at your opponent's hand, and you don't just scrap it, now you just banish it. So if you get lucky with the flips, all 3 Combiner Enigmas can be gone from the game, and then, that's just game over. And then there's Mind Wipe, who works kind of like Shockwave, not as strong as Shockwave, but when Mind Wipe attacks, again, you force your opponent to scrap a card. So these cards really put kind of the kibosh on the Enigma-style Combiner. So the question becomes, what do we do to keep Combiners, who are super important characters in the Transformers franchise and really iconic, what do we do to keep them in the game? And good thing is that the brilliant designers at Wizards of the Coast, the Transformers TCG team, they've already pretty much answered this question. Even in Wave 2, there was one, what they called a non-traditional combiner that came out along with the Enigma combiners, and that was Dreadwing. This, you can tell it's kind of a test character. If you look at Blackwing and Dreadwing's abilities, when one of them dies, the other one gets to combine, but you have to scrap 3 cards from your hand. That is a big ask. I have seen players like my friend Skylar, who have had success with Dreadwing, having a lot of card draw in their deck to fight that cost. But this is, again, this doesn't take an Enigma. You will get the combination off, but the stress it puts on your hand is really, really strong. This was in Wave 2, then in Wave 3, we saw an improved version. This is Skytread. Now with Skytread, instead of scrapping 3 cards, now you take your entire hand and you put it under Skytread. Both Skytread and Dreadwing cost fewer stars than traditional combiners, so you could have 3rd or 4th team members, but putting your hand under Skytread and then relying on him to attack to get those cards back can be pretty tough. Thankfully, in Wave 4, we have gotten a bit of support in that. My friend Rob especially has been playing Skytread and then using Scout Armor attached to Skytread Tank. And what that does, obviously, is when Skytread dies, you can put the cards under Skytread's combined form and still draw 2, so the pressure on your hand isn't as strong as it would be. And in addition, in Siege 2, we did get the Omega Supreme Combiner. And I'd say out of the combiners we saw as of Wave 4, Omega Supreme was the strongest. It still may not have been top tier in terms of meta competitive deck list, but Omega Supreme's very strong, especially against blue decks where you're swinging for that Pierce 4. So, you know, the team at Wizards, when Wave 2 came out, they saw that there was a weakness in the Enigma combiners, and they've been working on alternate ways to get combination working. And Omega Supreme is, again, one of those things where when it has a different combination trigger. So for Omega Supreme, as long as you keep one of your 3 guys alive, as long as the tank or the spaceship are alive, when your opponent reshuffles, then Omega Supreme gets to combine. And this leads to our Wave 5 combiners, which will start off with a promo combiner, that's Tidal Wave. Tidal Wave is a fun little janky combiner where you get extra guys that you get to deploy, and he needs 2 KOs on your side of the field to combine. So clever players have been able to figure out ways to use I Still Function to get 2 knockouts, different ways to, you know, make sure your opponent's attacking the deployed characters to keep Tidal Wave's health up as much as possible. It doesn't have a ton of health on Tidal Wave, but still a fun, different way to combine. The last combiner is obviously the strongest. Everyone's probably already familiar with it if you're watching this video. This is Sky Shadow. Sky Shadow is the strongest combiner. He's a super strong part of the meta in Wave 5. This, to me, shows that the Wizards of the Coast team has been dialing them in. Each wave we saw, you know, Wave 2 with Dreadwing, Skytread got a little stronger. Sky Shadow is basically just a stronger version of Skytread. You start out with 2 pieces that are, for their point cost, very strong. Sky Shadow Plane, Sky Shadow Tank. Total star cost is 15 stars with his Stratagem. Ominous's star count doesn't come in. And then what's nice about Sky Shadow is you combine them and there's essentially no cost to combining. As soon as someone dies, your cost is just the star for his Stratagem. As soon as one of your pieces dies, you get to go into Sky Shadow. If they've got an Autobot, you're pinging them for 3. His stats are great. With Ominous, he's got Pierce 4. And then combiners have this thing where you start out with a wide team and you go taller, you get down to 1 big character. Sky Shadow is nice in that you start 2 wide. When you go to Sky Shadow, you're essentially still 2 wide because after Sky Shadow dies, you still get 1 more swing with Ominous. So this is, I mean, out of the combiners, Sky Shadow is the strongest. So I think that Wizards of the Coast has done a great job in figuring out a way to make combiners work competitively in what they've done with Sky Shadow. I'm super excited to see in the future waves, now that they've kind of dialed things in where they might need to be in terms of what the cost for combining is, what their stats should be. You know, the Sky Shadow's got a big beefy attack, and he's still a character that you can play with another character. So if we go to back to the traditional Scramble City Combiner teams, I'm super excited to see what they do with future characters. But the purpose of this video is kind of to talk about, okay, what can we do with the characters that we have already that came out in Rise of the Combiners? And that leads me to what I am pretty excited about, which are these stratagem cards. I wanted to show these two, Villainous Spotlight and Swap Heads, because they both target different things. Villainous Spotlight targets a faction, Swap Heads targets a type of character, and they show that the retro strats and other strats that we've seen target, specific characters. If we go back to Sky Shadow Sync, that targets Sky Shadow, so you got to have Sky Shadow tank or Sky Shadow play in your deck to play that stratagem. For these guys, you got to have Decepticons or Titanmasters, but I'm wondering if there's a way to do a retro strat that instead of targeting a specific character, targets your combiner team. And that's where my idea would be for a new retro strat in a future wave to come out to help the rise of the Combiner Enigma team. The weakness of the Enigma team is that if you get Enigma of Combinations stripped out, unless you're lucky and you can do something to try and get it back in your hand, you're really in a lot of pain. So my idea is this is going to be a strict power boost. I recognize that this is not like a different way to play the Combiner. If you're running, Stunticons, aerial bots, Sentinels, any of those teams, you just play this card. But what it is a 1-star stratagem called the Enigma of Combination, call it whatever you want. The question I have is how to target the Combiner team. I was thinking if you have the Combiner trait, you can play it, but then what I was looking back is if you have like limbs or bot or alt modes or bots, they don't have the Combiner trait. But the way the card works, I wonder if you could target maybe an Enigma of Combination for each team, but then that might be too many retro strat. I like the idea of just having one that just helps all the Combiner teams. So it requires some tweaking in how you target. But the nice thing is in the text, it doesn't matter if you play it if you don't have a Combiner team, because it's just a useless card. So if you have a Combiner team, you play the card, and then it costs a star, but it lets you increase your star limit by 1. So it essentially zeroes itself out, which is important because a lot of those Combiner teams starting out in Rise of the Combiners were 25 stars. You need a way to get in a stratagem for free, essentially, otherwise you can't play the team. But what the text does, which you've probably already read by now, is once per game, you can play an Enigma action card from the scrap pile. When you do, you flip this. It's a get out of jail free card for your Enigma. When you get your guys in bot mode, as long as you've got Enigma in your hand or your scrap, the Chrome Dome can, he can still really screw with this if you target well with Chrome Dome. But other than that, you will get to combine, which I think doesn't fix everything about Combiners. The Rise of the Combiners, I think, are still a little under the power curve that exists now, but it at least lets you, play the team again and combine reliably without all the horrible stuff that has come out since then that really messes with the teams. I don't know that this is the only way to fix the old Combiner teams. It's also, Wizards of the Coast learned from Rise of the Combiners, and when they do Combiners again, they'll probably just not have, I assume, we wouldn't have Enigmas again, even with new Combiner teams. I think there's all sorts of ways to handle it, but it would make me super excited to go break Menasor out again if I had the opportunity to make sure I can play the Enigma. And the nice thing is, if you play the Enigma from your hand like normal, and you don't use this stratagem, you can still flip this card once per game later down the road to use your Enigma's second ability, whether it's Superion's extra ping, Menasor's draw 2 cards, whatever it is. But yeah, that's it. I mean, there's still so many Combiners that are coming down the road. Probably none of the traditional Scramble Cities in the next wave. But, there's Bruticus, there's Defensor, there's Abominus, there's Computron, there's Victorion, Skyrain. I'm hoping we get a new Menasor because I really love Menasor. There's all sorts of Combiners coming out. I'm hoping we'll see some additional support. I'm really loving Sky Shadow. I know probably people are sick of hearing about Sky Shadow, but he's a ton of fun. And I'm excited to see more Combiners in the future just because, like I said, besides transforming, Combiners are such a big part of the Transformers franchise. It's awesome that they're in the card game already, and I'm excited to see them get even stronger in the future. Thanks for listening to my TED Talk. I guess if you're still watching, I'd love to know what your thoughts are on how you'd upgrade the existing Combiners to kind of bring them back to the power curve. Well, maybe there's a problem I didn't think about in my stratagem idea. Maybe there's something else we should do. Let me know in the comments below. Leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll catch you all later. See ya.